Testing.
Ooh, that's scary. And the gain is up.
No, I haven't. Is this yours? Have you, like,
I will be sitting there.
has this got Rand's germs on it? You take that one.
I will take this.
Yep, all right. Tammy, are we good to go? Tina? All right. Thank you. With apologies, everybody, for being a few minutes starting tonight. Welcome to our Finance and Environment Committee meetings. This will be followed tonight by our council meetings. And for the purposes of public participation, we always encourage people, if you have something to say about an item on Finance and Environment Committee agenda, then please join us in the public participation for Finance and Environment Committee. If you'd like to speak to council, that's the second meeting tonight, and please save your public participation for them. If you're uncertain, just come on up. It's all good. And so first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We always enjoy having community members join us for our meetings. This is Finance and Environment Committee. Are there any additions to tonight's agenda?
Just the inclusion of the pink supplemental. I'll move approval as amended.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Kahakawila, seconded by Mayor Rands. All in favor, opposed, and the pink then will come up under other business, I suppose, yeah?
New business, I guess.
Right, okay. So we'll begin this evening with two presentations. And our first presentation is from Michael Lowry, who I have had the pleasure of meeting numerous times with Western Canada Marine Response Corporation. Council sent a letter to WCMRC with a series of questions posed by our Environmental Advisory Committee, and Michael is here tonight to address some of the concerns that were raised in that letter. Michael?
Thank you, Andy. And I have to apologize, I wasn't aware that there was sort of a public component, so it's less a presentation, it was more of a discussion, which is what the presentation is here for. So I didn't have any contextual slides about what the program's all about, so we won't dive in too far into that. But as Andy mentioned, we've been doing what we call a geographic response strategy program for the coast of BC, with particular focus on the southern portion of Vancouver Island, which is where all the international deep sea traffic is, along with the tanker traffic for the Trans Mountain project. So this program essentially is about bringing in data sets that we gather from the federal government, from the province, and from communities, and then developing protection strategies for those areas if they do fit. And we've been doing this since about 2016, and actually Metchosin was the first community that held a workshop for us. So we were very pleased for that to be our first workshop, and we've continued on with that program ever since. And then in about 2019, we did do an update to that program where we went through a new process with a new vendor to sort of update how we process that data. So a lot of what we're hearing today, or speaking to today, talks about those different processes. So the first recommendation from the committee was that WCMRC apply our shoreline sensitivity model to Metchosin and consider producing additional GRSs for new sites identified by the model. And I should say here that all that we're talking about today is it's a mapping platform that is available publicly. So if you're interested in looking at what the DRSs are that we're talking about, that information is available publicly. So the new model that we developed in about 2019 has been applied to Howe Sound and Barkley Sound, as well as the Sunshine Coast. And so we will continue to build out that model with different areas of the coast, but we will be doing new areas on the coast. So we don't plan right now on revisiting any areas, whether that's Vancouver Harbor, Gulf Islands, or Metchosin, in the near future. However, what I can commit to for the group, for the committee, is to do a second workshop, to come back and do another workshop to go over the findings again, if you'd like. So this model is always facilitated by engagement particularly with First Nations. So we work closely with Beecher Bay and SOOP, and it's been a very iterative process. So we've had meetings with them, we've had workshops, we've taken away the discussion points and come back and told them what models, or sort of what areas that we have developed GRSs for and what we haven't. And so some nations we've done this maybe 3, 4, 5 times. So we're happy to do that with Metchosin as well. And then the second request here was to come back with some of the feedback from the 2017 workshop in terms of which sites were selected and which weren't. And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. We don't have that data from the 2017 workshop, but like I said, we can come back and do yet another workshop with Metchosin in particular. Here we have GRSs considered for Metchosin shoreline, wetlands, and lagoons, and certainly these are part of the process for sure. We do have one already for Whitty's Lagoon, so these are definitely considered as part of the process. And the second piece here is to do field verification. So these geographic response strategies identify areas that we want to protect and the boom that's going to be used to protect that particular area. So it's done first on a map, it's a paper exercise, and then it is tested in the field. So we do field testing for these GRSs, including the Whitty's Lagoon that was mentioned in the report. So that field verification is part of the process. And here, this question here is around stating on the GRSs the conditions in spill response due to greater concerns about weather, like Beaufort Force 4, that we mentioned those on the GRSs. And so for a bit of a background on spill response, just like a forest fire, if you have high winds, it's going to be very challenging to do spill response. So there are conditions out there where the equipment does lose effectiveness or becomes dangerous. So Beaufort 4 is the one that's identified there as one of the levels, and this is actually laid out very clearly in the Canada Shipping Act. So the response organization regulations, so Transport Canada, which oversees response organizations such as WCMRC, states very clearly the conditions and the limitations, and so we don't feel it's necessary to add that to the GRSs when this is already right in the Canada Shipping Act. And so this recommendation here is to Transport Canada to require that no transport of dilbit occur when environmental conditions in the Strait of Juan de Fuca prevent the recovery of spilled dilbit. And so I think the question here is around the question of dilbit versus other products that we respond to. And the science out there does not have any difference between diluted bitumen in terms of a response and any other products out there that we'd be responding to, crudes, bunkers, etc. So one of the key people that is doing research into this is Dr. Heather Detman, and she's done test tanks in Alberta where they've tested diluted bitumen with simulations of wave actions, different sediment loads, different temperature, different salinity, and they found that it still floats after 3 weeks. So spill responders have not changed, or we do not have separate techniques for dealing with dilbit than we do with crude or bunker. Okay? And this is also reflected in real world situations. So we've actually cleaned up a diluted bitumen spill in 2007, 100 tons of diluted bitumen, so we know that our equipment works in those situations. And there's been a lot of other research done as well, all Canadian federal government research. Here, similar conclusions that it behaves very similar to crude oil, and these are technical reports done by Environment Canada, DFO, and again, NRCan. So the next recommendation here is that once we develop GRSs, that we put equipment packages strategically located near the locations, and this is 100% what our program calls for. So you see this pyramid here is how we approach the building out of the response strategies. So the first step there is the risk, analyzing the risk, and obviously with shipping lanes here, we're in a high risk zone. Then we do the mapping, and then we do the GRS, and then we install the coastal response packages, and that's the program where we're at right now. And then we develop relationships with vessels of opportunity to train them to deploy those equipments as well. So we're in the process of doing that. We've recently installed 2 packages in Souk, and this would be addition to our new base that's going to be stationed at Beecher Bay. So this is certainly part of the program, and we'll be continuing to roll out these packages. And finally, oh, actually, I think this is the second last one, that the council urges us to release our sunken and submerged oil plan. So if there is a condition where sunken or oil does sink, how do you clean it up? And so there are techniques that are used. Primarily it's going to involve divers going down with suction to do that. Mostly where this happens is in river conditions where you have a lot of sediment and a lot of wave action. You can see heavier products like dilbit sink in those situations. And so we've developed a sunken and submerged oil plan because we have response requirements on the Fraser River. And this sunken and submerged oil plan will be made public by the end of this year. So this is certainly a recommendation that we will be meeting for sure. This plan will be made public. Oh, and then this is what I want to point out here is that there has been a good analysis of the existing data applied to the coast of BC, led by Dr. Kenneth King, who is one of the leads in looking into dilbit and other products in terms of spill response. And they have applied the test tank analysis to the entire coast of BC, and where they saw that there might be a chance of dilbit or other heavier products sinking would be at the mouth of the Fraser River after a heavy storm during the springtime. Okay? So this is a great report to read, to look at the situation along the coast. Happy to forward along to the committee. And this last one is around the use of dispersants. So in Canada, we primarily use mechanical recovery to do cleanup, so using booms and skimmers and whatnot. Other jurisdictions, like in the UK, for example, they rely quite a bit on dispersants to do the cleanup. Right now, it is currently illegal to use dispersants, and that is set through Environment Canada. And if they are currently looking at whether they're going to change those regulations, but that's entirely within the purview of Environment Canada. So WCMRC does not make those decisions. So those are the 9 recommendations that came through. So I've tried to sort of address them with the information we have available. Is there anything you want to kind of dive into a little bit further? Anyone on the committee?
Absolutely.
Great.
Michael, thank you. So I'm going to open it up to our committee here for their questions or thoughts on your presentation. I'll save mine for the end because that's how the chair usually operates in these. And then given that we're so fortunate to have you here tonight, we'll see if I was going to offer an opportunity to Gary Fletcher as well, because he put so much time into the first workshop and is so knowledgeable in these fields that, and since we have you here. So committee, any questions for Michael? Any comments, thoughts?
Looking forward to Gary's question.
Okay, I've got a few comments, Michael.
Did you want me to stay up here, Andy? Or?
Yeah, why don't you stay up there so that you have a microphone and everybody can hear the responses, and that'll make it easier for recording and things like that. I was delighted to hear your offer to hold a second workshop in Metchosin. I really think we would like to take you up on that. And it would give us an opportunity to have a look at the sites that have been identified for GRSs so far, and highlight any that people in the community feel strongly about considering for additions to that list, and having a look at the strategies that apply to them as well. So I'll talk to our Environmental Advisory Committee and others, but certainly from my point of view, I think another workshop out here would be welcomed by the community, at least by concerned people that have talked to me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's no problem, Andy. And like I said, it's become very much a key part of the process is those engagement sessions after that initial data has been run. And we do it, like I said, it's an iterative process, and so there's often with groups particularly with the nations who have expressed the most interest in the program. It can be something that happens 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So we're happy to come back to do 1 more, 2 more, 3 more, whatever it takes.
What's it been? Has it been 4 years, I bet? Do you remember?
It was 2017.
2017,
Yeah,
5
so
years.
5 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would be a good opportunity. I'll get back to you on that when I've
Sure.
consulted with people in the community. Can we go to MEASC recommendation number 6, because I'm not sure that the way it's worded and the response that we received properly convey the concerns that were expressed at the MEASC meeting, at the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting.
Sure.
So the concern that was expressed at the meeting is that under conditions when there's no feasible hope of recovering dilbit or any oil product from the ocean surface, you know, when conditions are that rough, that the advisory committee said, well, should we even be transporting dilbit and petroleum products? So it wasn't, your answer was more about how the dilbit was quite similar to other petroleum products in that regard, and so I suppose the recommendation from MEASC, or the question is, if we have no possibility of cleaning it up, why do we allow transport under those conditions at all? And your point was well taken. The question they wrote was about dilbit, but it applies equally well to other oil products as well. But the question isn't so much differences between the types of oil, but whether we actually ought to be allowing transport when we have no opportunities to clean up if something goes wrong.
So is the question to WCMRC whether we should shut down the shipping lanes during bad weather? Because we certainly don't have that capacity, and I don't think that's something that even Transport Canada would consider. But if you're looking for an entity that would be able to take any sort of action on shutting down shipping during bad weather, that is certainly, you know,
that would be Transport
that's
Canada,
certainly a
right?
Transport Canada thing.
So
But I think that just to kind of further that, Andy, you know, I think this idea that cleanup is impossible is not necessarily something I think people should be taking away. We have certainly responded to spills in areas of the coast with very bad weather, and so one example would be the spill up in Bella Bella. So that's a very hazardous area of the coast. We were there for 40 days. Of those days, there were certainly days where it was very challenging to go out there and unsafe. Mm-hmm. And so we did shut down operations for 11 days out of 40 days. So if you had a spill out here of any kind of product, you know, dilbit, bunker, whatever, and there was bad weather and it was unsafe, certainly we would not be sending people out into harm's way. But when it was suitable, the cleanup would resume, right?
Right.
So it is certainly weather dependent, like most, you know, a lot of other emergency response type operations. That does not mean it is impossible, right? So there's going to be a lot of different situations that come into play. There's so many factors that come into play, we can't predict them all. But certainly, even in heavy weather situations when we responded to in the past, it doesn't mean it's impossible or that the entire thing is shut down. There will be pauses for those particular days, but the operations resume. Other things can be happening at the same time as well. You can be doing your shoreline protection. There's a lot of things that are happening. We don't just look out the window and say, oh, it's rainy and go back to bed. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening. So just because it's bad weather does not mean spill response is impossible. It becomes challenging, and if it's unsafe, it will not continue. But certainly the operation is very much still in play.
Yeah. I think a central part of that concern is that those are probably the conditions in which the spills are most likely to happen. And so they're, you know, I mean, some of your GRSs acknowledge that.
Right.
That the response strategies will work under certain conditions and won't work under others, and you'll have to wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental principle of spill response, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I dug up the article you sent along and read some other articles regarding dilbit and the marine environment. was struck by the comments in there that you made passing mention of about without weathering, vertical mixing, or high concentrations of particles, fresh dilbit is not dense enough to sink in seawater. Conditions of vertical mixing, and the article also talks about coherent vertical circulation under certain ocean conditions taking place not just in the mouth of the Fraser River during freshet, but also sometimes in the Strait of Juan de Fuca and Georges Strait and Puget Sound, even though there's no shipping taking place there. That if there is coherent vertical circulation, oil forced below the surface by waves might remain there. So, I mean, there are concerns expressed even in this article you've provided regarding the prolonged submersion of oil products, including dilbit. I guess when they talk about vertical mixing and concerns about that, a lot of this work has been done in tanks. And we can expect, of course, you understand better than anyone in the room that the products will respond differently in the marine environment in the ocean. I was quite pleased to hear about the chemical spill treating agents in BC waters. That was very, very heartening news, and I'm sure the members of the Environmental Advisory Committee will be happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, for some context there on the environmental processes that happen when oil is spilled, and this applies to any oil that's spilled. So from your marine diesels all the way up to your more persistence, like your dilbits and your bunkers and your crudes. So the weathering process begins almost immediately. And for what that weathering process is a couple of different things happen. So one, there's evaporation. And so different types of products have different levels of evaporation. With your marine diesels, you could have almost 100% evaporation even after a couple hours. With the more persistent, heavier products like bunkers and crudes and dilbits, you're probably going to get 30% evaporation approximately. And now the science has shown that even after 30% evaporation, that product is still lighter than water. Okay. Now the other things that happen is it starts to emulsify, which means water gets into the oil and it spreads even further. So it becomes kind of like this foamy type substance. And then there are going to be particles that do get immersed into the water column as well. And that applies to all of the different products. So there's certainly, the oil is going to get into different particles of the marine environment, absolutely. The vast majority of it is going to be on the surface, which is why we use the booms and the skimmers to recover.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael, for answering all my questions fully and completely. Gary, did you have any questions for Michael?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the same we started with this one, environment conditions.
Hang on, Gary, before you go on, is this going to be a problem for recording what Gary says? Yeah.
Just come to the
Did you want to
microphone.
come to the
Gary.
mic, Gary?
And I think I've discussed this with, do you want me to identify who I am?
Yes, please.
Gary Fletcher, 4645 William Head Drive, Road. I think I've discussed this with Michael several times. We've had several conversations in the past, but this particular point of recommendation is my main concern, because I did an analysis back when we were doing the work on the National Energy Board work. I did an analysis of the environmental conditions in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And it turns out that when you look at every hour, and I looked at every hour of 2020 as measured by Environment Canada on the tower at Race Rocks. When you look at every hour, 40% of the time, that's all day and night, 40% of the time, the wind speed is over 28 kilometers per hour in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. At this end, the work done by Trans Mountain used the data from the western entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca for their wind speeds in Strait of Juan de Fuca. We pointed out to them that it was totally different than the eastern entrance. So the point is that out here, if you're at 28 kilometers an hour, and I understand, I think this is right, you can't operate above 3 knots. I would like to see an analysis done of the exact time amount of time when the current speed is below 3 knots and the wind speed is below 28. And I would predict that it would be much over 50, 60, even 70% of the time. And as I've said before, I think this is just unacceptable, and this message has to go through to Transport Canada. It's already gone through. They've ignored it in the past. And you say, is it possible to shut down shipping? Well, if you have a problem down Metchosin Road and there's something spilled on the road, yeah, you shut down traffic. How does that work for international shipping? I don't know, but Transport Canada better figure it out. Because I don't think Metchosin community, the 50-some kilometers of shoreline, should ever be exposed to that risk. And with the advanced modeling that's possible nowadays, it's to me very evident that you would actually be able to get your booming equipment out there very little percent of the time and be effective in containing, at least, if not cleaning up, an oil spill. Yeah, so that was one of my, the other point was just brought up about the vertical mixing. Back in I can't remember the time, it was either in the 1990s or late 1980s, UVic had their ship going through, their research ship, and they did a towed tomography type of instrument measuring vertical upwellings. And they found that Race Passage has one of the highest vertical upwellings on the coast of BC. That's never been taken into account, as far as I know, in terms of conditions for mixing and making dilbit more difficult to isolate on the surface and clean up. So that's my concern, Michael, and I know that you may not have control over those conditions, but the ball has to drop in terms of what Transport Canada has to recommend. And what gets me is it's never brought to the public. No one has made that clear in the newspaper articles or whatever. All you make clear is that, yes, there's a place at Souk with all this instrumentation and your ships, and there's been so many millions of dollars spent along the coast of BC in equipping for oil spill response. The reality is, I believe still, and I've yet to be proven wrong on it, that no matter how good your oil response equipment is, you're not going to be able to get out there when you really need to. And that's my main point. Okay?
Thank you for your input, Gary. Michael, did you want to respond to anything that Gary said?
No, I mean, I think we already did. If the concern is when should shipping happen?
At the microphone, please,
sorry.
Michael. Sorry, just so we can get a good record of it.
Yeah, no, thanks for your comments, Gary. I know we've had many a conversation over the years. But like I mentioned earlier, I mean, if the concern here is when should shipping happen in the shipping lanes, that is clearly a Transport Canada conversation, as I think we all know here. And there are avenues now for public engagement with Transport Canada and the Coast Guard through the Oceans Protection Plan, and it's recently just been renewed for another 9 or 10 years. So Those forums do exist to speak to Transport Canada, to speak to the Coast Guard about these areas, to speak to Environment Canada, to learn more about their science and research into dilbit and dispersants. So there are forums for those conversations to happen. But like I said, certainly we are not in a position to be restricting traffic based on weather in the shipping lanes.
Mayor Rands.
Yeah, what about the concerns about the limited amount of time that you could be out there that Gary expressed?
Well, I can't speak to hypothetical spill situations, Mayor. I can speak to historical spill situations, and so we have been in spill situations on the coast in the wintertime in heavy weather, and we have had to stop. Response, absolutely. So I can't sit here and say that's never going to happen, that if there was a big spill that we would be able to respond 100% of that time. Probably not. But does not mean that response stops or the response is not going to happen. So if just again, like the analogy to fighting a wildfire, right? If you have heavy winds and it's dangerous for the responders to be out there, they're not going to go out there. How can I predict ahead of time what percentage that's going to be based on data? No, I cannot do that, and I won't predict how often we're going to be out there in a particular big spill situation. But what I can say is that the spill response will continue until that spill is cleaned up. Whether that means if we have had to shut down for 10, 20, 30, 40, 60% of the time, the response will not stop until the spill is cleaned up. So that's just how it's going to work, and certainly we are well aware of the limitations of spill response equipment. It's based on weather. We have no control over that. Our program has been around what we can influence, which is how fast we get to the spill sites, which is why we've been building these new response bases along the coast, which is why there's going to be a brand new one right down in Beecher Bay, just like you're aware. So yeah, we don't have any impact on the weather, but that could impact the response in terms of how many days we're out there. But like I said, the response will continue until the entire spill is cleaned up, even if you have to shut down for several days.
We've talked as well. Has the response time, now that you've actually got the facility in place at Beecher Bay, has the response time met what you said it was? I think it was like 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah, so I think maybe some context is required there. So for the shipping lanes, Transport Canada sets out response time requirements, and they set those out in the mid-90s. And so those are pretty outdated. So in some places it's 72 hours for a maximum on-scene initial response. And so for the Trans Mountain preparations and enhancements, we propose going down to a maximum 6 hours response time for the entire shipping lane. So that's what's driving our new bases in Sydney and Beecher Bay and Port Alberni. So the enhancements come into effect 3 months before the pipeline goes into operation, which is in 2023, Q3 of 2023. So we won't be fully up and ready until the fall of next year, approximately. So some of the bases are already open, but the Beecher Bay base, for example, won't be open until probably this time or a bit later next year. Also, a key piece of that 6-hour response in the shipping lanes is the new offshore supply vessel that we are bringing online. So that's also, we announced, going to be stationed at Beecher Bay. And so that vessel is key to being on scene within 6 hours in the entire shipping lanes, with enough capacity to handle a 2,500 ton spill initially. So that asset will also again be coming online about Q3 2023. So that's when the 6-hour new requirements will come into effect.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Little.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. It provided some answers for me, and also thank you to Gary Fletcher for his comments as well. And I appreciate how much work has gone into the MCRC program and into reviewing the recommendations. The reason why I like this particular recommendation is because an ounce of prevention is worth, whatever that saying is, an ounce of cure. Because certainly anybody in this room, if you talk about Exxon Valdez, just those two words will conjure up images of a coastal line that is completely destroyed for years and years and years. And the fact remains, and I don't think it's disputed by anybody, that if there is an oil spill, and it will be probably a major oil spill with our 50 kilometers of coastline, it will decimate and it will destroy Metchosin as we know it. And so I think this is an important recommendation that Council take some leadership on urging Transport Canada to require that there's no transport or limited transport of bitumen, diluted bitumen along these straits, because even I understand your commitment to spill response, but you can only do so much. And when I worry about it is at those very stormy nights where nobody can go out there, and then we're looking at it 18 hours later when it's already washed up on the beaches, and then we've got volunteers trying to clean up. It's a horrible scenario, and that's what we might be looking for. And so I think it's important for us to provide leadership and urge Transport Canada towards this recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Prevention is absolutely, the most important side of the equation. But to that point, the Exxon Valdez did shape the regime that we have here in Canada today. So it was lessons from that spill, and in fact, the entire history of spill response internationally is lessons learned from spills that have happened. And with Exxon, it was a report made to the federal government that looked at what went wrong in that spill. That is the reason why we have measures in place today, the safety measures such as escort tugs for tankers, local pilots for all deep sea vessels, improvements in radar, all these things that double hulls on tankers. So all these safety measures that exist now in the Canada Shipping Act were a direct result of the Exxon on Valdez. So I agree totally. Prevention is absolutely the key now. Now with the Trans Mountain project, they've also added another layer of protection where they're now requiring there to be an escort tug that typically in the past the escort tugs have basically stopped around the Victoria area. And now there'll be a new leg of escort tug requirement from Victoria out to J-Boy. So the whole Juan-Vica Strait will now have escort tugs for tankers, where it didn't have that in the past. So prevention is certainly top of mind for the Canadian regime and for industry, and that's why they've taken those measures.
Okay, can I ask one other question?
Yes, yeah.
And so if Trans Mountain Pipeline didn't go through, would we have had the Beecher Bay WCMRC site? No. So
the entire enhancement program was based around commitments that Trans Mountain made to the government, and so one of the conditions then for them was to fund the enhancement program to come into place. So that's the genesis for the program, and so that's where the funding came from. So all of our other members, so the shipping industry and the oil industry are legally required to have memberships with a response organization. So all of our other members didn't make those commitments, so of course they can't be expected to pay for it. So the funding came from the expanded pipeline.
right, so it concerns me that the Trans Mountain didn't use the accurate data from Race Rocks regarding what Gary Fletcher had mentioned. That's a real concerning point for me.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And this was a very not debated, but it was a prominent topic in the reconsideration hearing, and so there was a lot of data on both sides of the conversation in terms of what was the right data. Not something I can necessarily get into now, but there is a lot of reading that you can do into this topic if you're interested. Yeah. On both sides, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Rands, you had another question, comment?
I mean, you've stated the figures before, but it might bear stating again. What without the Beecher Bay facility, the response time to a beach off Metchosin, or a soil spill off Metchosin, how much has that been enhanced by?
Well, we're going from a required 72-hour response down to a required 6-hour response. Yeah. So that's the reduction. Our posture on Vancouver Island up until the enhancements was in Duncan. And so because of this new 6-hour response, we are adding bases in Nanaimo, Port Alberta, Ucluelet, Beecher Bay, Sydney, and then on the lower mainland, Fraser River and the Port of Vancouver. So with all of those bases, it's 6 new bases, it's 40 new boats, doubling the fleet, doubling the personnel, are to meet those new requirements, that 6-hour response window maximum.
Excellent. Okay. So I would like to propose a motion that we pass this issue back to MEASC for their information and for their advice regarding organizing another workshop with WCMRC.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Kahakawila. Any discussion around that? All in favor? Opposed? All right. Good. Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate you coming out tonight. You're welcome to join us for the rest of the evening. It's always entertaining here in Metchosin, but if I were you, I would head for the exit and enjoy the rest of this beautiful night out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And one last thing just to leave on is I mentioned a little bit about the packages, the equipment packages. So we are actively looking for locations. So if there is a location that anyone in the room feels would be suitable, please let me know, because we are happy to install those. And I'll just flip back to. So the packages, they all contain about 1,700 feet of boom with anchors. And they can be deployed on land, like you see at Whiff and Spit there in Souk. But also we can put them on floats and they can be tied up to any existing marina as well. So if there's an awareness of location within Metchosin that you'd like to let us know, please let me know and we can go down and investigate.
What about the Royal Bay area? It's not quite in Metchosin, but it's going to be, the wind really whips through there.
Yeah, it does have to be relatively sheltered if it's going to be, on the water. We've actually got one now at Saturn and Lyle Harbor, and we decided it's probably not going to work long term. But so we would send our ops folks out, and I can send them out to take a look at that particular site, and they can get back to me if it'd be suitable. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. Okay.
Councillor McKinnon, can we ask Mr. Gary Fletcher to provide us some guidance on potential locations?
How about if because we have a lot of stuff to cover tonight, I'm sure we would welcome Gary's input during public participation. Would that be acceptable to you?
Okay.
All right. So our other presentations this evening, this is very exciting. I can't remember the last time we had 2 presentations. Mm-hmm. It's the time of year when organizations are applying for grants in aid in Metchosin. We have 4 applications for grants in aid this year, of which we have 2 of the applicants here tonight. And we've had a look at your materials, so I would ask you to confine yourselves to, let's say, 4 minutes, if that's all right. But we know that we've already had a look at your materials here. And first up is Sandy Jenkins with the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues.
Sandy's sick, so I will give a report. Shall we let our guests go first, and then I'll give the report for IDAC-T?
So to let Judy Roper go first? Yeah, sure, let's do that. Judy, you're up first with the Metchosin Preschool Society.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Judy Roper. I'm representing the Metchosin Preschool Society. I just want to take a moment to thank you for your previous support. And so with last year's Metchosin grant and aid money, the preschool was able to put a gravel in our playground, we filled up our sandbox, and we bought an outdoor container to put some of our supplies in. So thank you very much for that. And also thank you very much for the giving me the evening to be able to present for this year's Metchosin Grant and Aid. So as most of you know, the preschool is over 60 years old. It's been running out of the old Metchosin building, and it is primarily parent-run. It's a co-op model, and because of that, we are able to keep our finances really low. And so the purpose of the preschool is to offer a high-quality education to as many people as possible. And so along with the grant and aid, there are other ways we make this preschool feasible financially through a lot of fundraising activities, also through in-kind donations. And one of the biggest ways is we have a great relationship with St. Mary's Church. And so they offer us that building free of rent. And in return, we do pay for all the utilities, and then we also do minor fixes to the buildings. And so we've been doing this for over 60 years. We have come across a little bit of a roadblock now, so quite a big challenge in that, not relationship, but just in the situation that we're in. And so the preschool now is unable to do the major fixes to that building because it is quite old. And so if you look at the building, the back part is on a foundation, but the front part is not on a foundation. And so I don't know the science and the engineering behind the building, but if you think about it, it's got a peak here, and then you've got the sides here, and then the water has been running off down the sides for all of these years, and the building is actually sinking. And so it's been sinking on both sides. And so if you actually look at the building, there is a peak right in the middle of that floor. And so we've been able to do, like I said, a lot of minor fixes up to this point. And so we've put in the flooring, and then we've, kind of lifted up some areas. But we can't do that anymore. The building needs to essentially be torn down at this point. And so we've actually consulted with a lot of different people in the community, and that has been the consensus. And so that kind of leaves the preschool in a little bit of a pickle, I guess. So we have kind of two options. One option is to essentially tear down that building and rebuild it. And the other option is to find a new location. And we love Metchosin, and the preschool loves being in Metchosin, so we don't want to leave that location. So we've talked to the Anglican Church of Canada because they own that space, and they do not have the money to fix the building. But we have talked to them about working with them for the preschool to do all of the fundraising, essentially to then tear that building down and then rebuild, form, fit, function. So that would be in the exact same shape, it would look identical, except it would be upgraded to the modern standards. And then in lieu, they would let us use that building for at least 25 years, again, free of rent. So currently, we have an agreement in principle with the Anglican Church of Canada, and we're looking to officialize that. So that's like our next step. And then once we get that, we're going to be going into kind of 3 phases. And so the first phase, we're looking at a possible land survey, defining a scope of work, contacting an architect to then go over the plans. And the second phase would then be to run a massive community fundraising campaign. And then the third phase would be to tear down the building and rebuild it. And so for this year, we're asking through the Metchosin Grant and Aid to help us fund that initial phase. So the land survey, the architect, and then providing the scope of work. And so we're asking for $1,500 to help us with those costs. And so we acknowledge that this year it's a little bit different. In the past, we've always asked, can you help us with money to fix the floor? Very specific projects, but we're in a very different situation right now. So I just want to say thank you again for all the support you've given us in the past. And I was just wondering if you had any questions for me about this project.
Committee questions for Judy?
I just have a comment. So my daughter did go through the Metchosin preschool at the play and stay when she was 18 months, and then first and second year. So it's a valuable resource for the community, and I'll do whatever I can to help out. Absolutely, it's valuable to our community.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of people in the community who've expressed very, similar thoughts about the preschool and have had children and even grandchildren. They have 3 generations of people who've gone through the preschool, and we don't want to leave that location. So working our hardest that we can, you know, with the Anglican Church of Canada to make that happen. Any other questions?
Just a comment, I was chatting with Erin Vandewater the other day,
Yeah.
and she met her husband in preschool when they were
Oh,
both
really? I didn't
kids
know
in
that.
preschool. Yeah, that's
Oh,
when
that's
she and
amazing.
Taylor first met, was in preschool. So that it's not even a high school romance; it's a preschool romance.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Love that story.
That's a good one.
Anyway, thank you very much,
Okay,
Judy.
well, thank
I
you again.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Sandy Jenkins, under the weather, represented this evening by Councillor Little.
Right. So I'm the council liaison to IACD, which is the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues. And this was submitted by the President, Marnie Essery, the chair of this committee. So just a few notes. The need for outreach and referral to resources during the ongoing COVID realities is huge, and IACD has helped many Metchosin residents and linked with many agencies struggling to help their clients and stay open during these difficult times. Due to the ongoing concerns about people who are immune compromised, at risk, and more vulnerable with the COVID protocol in mind, IACD was unable to host large gatherings like the community picnic that they've held at the Metchosin Community House this year as well. The online music nights have been incredibly popular, and actually I've attended many of them. They're really fun, and we were thrilled to co-host an online music night with Metchosin seniors. Plans are in the works to co-host another music night with Metchosin seniors in the future. These events have meant that seniors and people with disabilities could enjoy music from the comfort of their own home with their caregivers, family, and friends while staying safe. IACD gave the musician donating their time and talents a gift card to local businesses of their choice as a thank you. Local businesses have been struggling during the pandemic, and IACD wanted to support local businesses that are accessible and inclusive. I also received a gift certificate myself as a door prize to a local business, so I can attest to that. In the future, IACD will be hosting small group musical outings at a local music in the park, music nights and markets. IACD will cover accessible transportation costs for people with disabilities to get there if needed, and if they have RSVP'd for the community event. IACD will give people RSVP'd a stipend to cover snacks and beverages of their choice, so that we are not able to share food during the time of COVID protocol. Now specifically, IACD continues to offer accessibility suggestions to all municipalities upon request. This year, IACD gave accessible feedback and suggestions of possible funding opportunities to Metchosin regarding remodeling and restoration of the old school museum. In particular, Marnie Essery's advice to us at the old museum, the old school museum regarding accessibility and the ramp. Continue, sorry. Regarding the ramp option versus the lift option, and the ramp option was going to take up too much geography there, and so they made the difficult decision to buy the lift at considerable cost to the Museum Society, but that was based on recommendation from IACD, and the lift is there, and that was specifically because of recommendations from the Disability Council. So with that, I submit that respectfully.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the for IACD through Councillor Little committee?
Is it, how much are they asking for? It was $250. Is that their request?
Yeah, I believe the request is, as it has been in past years, to sponsor their annual picnic. Right, that's what we fund each year for IACD, I believe.
Yeah, I think they're doing other options because of the annual picnic not being available this year to many of their members who are also immune compromised. So they're just being very careful.
Lisa's just pointed out, that's on page 48 of your package, the ask. All right, seeing no more questions on that item, I would propose to this committee that I do what I've done in past years, which is that I will solicit input from committee members regarding your wishes in terms of funding for grants and aid. I will collate that information and bring a recommendation back to our next Finance and Environment Committee meeting for decision. Does that work for everybody once again?
Yeah, sure does.
Okay. Yes,
I just had a question, maybe you can answer it, Councillor McKinnon, and that is, I was looking at the request from the Habitat Acquisition Trust, and I know that you've been involved with that group, or are involved with that group, and I was just a little concerned, so I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate, and maybe, if you can, is it on the amount in their financial statement for wages and contracts, which for the 2021-22 budget is well over half of what their total income that they're going to be getting pretty much all through grants and donations. So what do they, that's a lot in the wages. So do you have any input on that?
Yeah, certainly someone from the trust would be better able to answer that question than I would, but I do know that a lot of the programs that they've run in Metchosin, for example, and some of which I've helped out with, are very staff driven. Whether it's covenant monitoring, which costs them an awful lot of money each year, the Good Neighbors programs that they've run in Metchosin, where for example, they ran a Good Neighbors program along Bilston Creek, where everybody who had property backing onto the creek was contacted and had the opportunity to have HAT staff come out and make recommendations about management. So an awful lot of their work is staff driven. They also bought a couple of pieces of land last year for conservation, but an awful lot of the work that they do is conservation covenants and landowner contact stuff.
I see. Sure, thanks.
And we can also comment on that. Andy or Councillor McKinnon and I went on a walk with HAT up to Morley's property at Camas Ridge, and some of the young people that were employed by HAT to do the conservation, they're not paid a lot, but they sure do some great work, especially up on Morley's Ridge.
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a problem in a way, because just about anybody else can offer them more money, and we just lost one of HAT's participants in the Maryhill process to employment elsewhere. Anyway, great. Thank you very much, everybody. That brings us to public participation. Thank you, Judy, for Finance and Environment Committee. Does anybody have any public participation for Finance and Environment Committee? And Shelley, if I could ask you and others to begin with your name and address, please.
I wrote that down so I wouldn't forget.
Excellent, thank you.
Shelley Donaldson, Chalister Court resident. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon, for the opportunity to speak this evening. I would like to commend you for your manner in which you welcomed the public to the budget meetings this past year, making us feel comfortable to speak while navigating Zoom and the complex topics of finances. I also wish to extend my appreciation to the committee for your diligence in navigating the depth of each line item of these financial statements. I don't believe that it is an easy task, but do hope that you are confident you voted on each decision with a comprehensive understanding of each topic. I was only one of 3 taxpayers who consistently attended the budget meetings, as I've done for the past 3 years. I'm fortunate to have a flexible schedule, as these meetings are generally conducted in the daytime, when most people in the community have to leave for employment elsewhere. During that time, I have learned a great deal by the patience of the committee and staff in answering my questions. Budget can be a useful working document that demonstrates financial history, and with that, we can adjust finances to suit the needs of our community better. This evening, I need clarity of the information listed on page 30 of the, is it the SOPI or something, or SOFI? Yeah,
Right.
SOFI. The part where it says schedule of remuneration and expenses, specific is the payments for 2021 BC wildfire deployment. This has been a great asset for our volunteers to have an opportunity to go and get some experience and do some great community work in doing some wildfire activity. I do have friends in the Merritt area, and I can't remember the name of the lake that's up there, but I remember talking to Mr. Gravel about his experience up there, and it was quite moving. So the question that I have is the verbiage that says personal vehicle costs, and I was just wondering if there was an explanation for the line item that says 59 personal vehicle. Is it like for gas or insurance, or how is that categorized?
It's, my understanding is it's based on mileage.
Okay,
So
so
it's
it's like
a-
a per diem kind of thing?
Per kilometer kind of charge. Is that?
Well, I have a little extra to that.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
So, typically, the district receives money for fire crew and engine and those types of things. The personal vehicle in this case had lights and siren, it was very specific for their needs. So that, a specific vehicle, which is also a personal vehicle, was sent up there for that purpose.
Okay, yeah, I did see the line item where it was apparatus that had gone. It's just, there was such a discrepancy in all the different amounts. There was, one was $1,100, $5,900, and there was a few other things. So it was just trying to understand what that all meant.
This is definitely new this year.
Okay.
It was something that the auditors suggested, that we break that down,
Hmm.
because we have been trying to have a better approval process for deployment and the use of our staff, our crew, our engines, and affording the opportunity for different amenities to go out there.
And so who comes up with that cost? Did you say it was the province, or is it council?
Province,
Yeah,
the
the-
Okay.
They're funding it, yeah.
And
Okay.
they provide the breakdowns and the charge outs for the specific engines
Okay,
and also for the types of crew that they require.
great. Thank you once again for helping me understand better how the funding works for the assets of our community.
And that was a good point, I think, that our CAO raised here, that when this happens, when we decide to deploy to the interior, it all happens very quickly. And an awful lot has to happen very quickly. And so this year we are taking the opportunity to learn what we could from that rapid deployment and write some additional policies for the district that will be in place the next time we have the opportunity to drop everything and help out in the interior.
Yeah, and so that,
Between now and then, we'll rewrite those policies so that they'll better reflect some of the things the auditors mentioned and some of the
Right.
things we thought we could have done better had we had the time to ponder things this year.
And
That's
that will
just
come
not the way it
forward-
rolls out, right?
And that will come forward at an upcoming meeting that Councilor McKinnon chairs.
yeah, it's been very interesting, and my husband and I did go to, there was like a debrief for the public to understand better what the crews were all there, and being able to tell us some of their experiences and what they did and stuff. And so, and then they're bringing some money back for, to put things into the hall and that sort of thing too, and they're getting paid for it. And then, we still have our people here that have to protect our community. So, that's always a concern, not only to let different ones go on different shifts, right? So we're not stuck with
Quite right.
no experienced people here. Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Shelley. Any other public participation for Finance and Environment Committee? All right, seeing none, then adoption of minutes for Finance and Environment Committee, April 4th. Can I get a
Move adoption.
moved by Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Kahakawilla. All in favor? Opposed? That passes. Receipt of minutes from the Environmental Advisory Committee. Can I get a motion for receipt?
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Little. Any questions about that? All in favor? Opposed? That passes. Okay, business arising. We have received the MEASC report and recommendations on the buffer lands. My understanding of the process is at this point that will be consolidated with the recommendations from the Agriculture Advisory, or from
Parks and
PTASC certainly, and and public input on the buffer lands to inform an eventual council decision about the buffer lands. Yes? Okay, this is a good opportunity if there are any questions about the MEASC recommendations. Mayor Rance.
No questions, just a comment. This is, I appreciated the report. It's very well put together and even-handed, so what I would have expected from the ask.
So the map looks much better in color,
Yeah, that's right.
but we'll have it in color when we're dealing with it later on. Councillor Little.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo those comments. I mean, it really is a really great report, and it's useful for us to have opinions from multiple advisory committees, and I really appreciate their effort. It took them a long time to do individual site visits, and also this report, so I thank them for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, then I suppose, what would we do now? Move receipt?
Move receipt.
Move receipt, Councillor Little,
yeah.
seconded by Councillor Kahakawilla. All in favor? Opposed? Next up, this is for information, our statements of financial information from 2021. So unless there are items of discussion, I'll accept the motion for receipt of the SOFI.
So moved.
Second?
Councillor Kahakawilla, Mayor Rans, Councillor Little.
Just a discussion point. I had asked some questions of our staff accountant, and one of the items one of the questions was regarding the consultant for the school. I hadn't seen it, and I looked very closely in the SOFI report regarding Pivotal IRM Inc. and what their compensation was.
Right.
And that was at $25,000, so it wasn't included in this
Right.
report. And I wanted to know if you could clarify, is that the threshold for anything that is included in a SOFI report, or is it 50,000, or where does that sit?
I believe it's 25,000 for the
Okay.
SOFI report.
Okay, great. So then that's why, if it was 25,000, I guess it should have been in this report. If it was $24,999, then it wouldn't have been in this report.
Correct.
Okay, so that's an error.
So Sam may have rounded up or
Yeah.
something when you were talking with him.
I guess, I don't know. So maybe that's something to check. And then the second thing is that I had questions regarding one of our consultants in how it was paid and whether that was put together, and whether that was below the 25,000 or above the 25,000. And Sam is going to check on that regarding our public works consultant.
Right. I'm certain you will get good answers from Sam.
Indeed.
But if you don't, for whatever reason, if you're not satisfied with them, we can bring them back at the next F&E meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have a motion and a second to receive the SOFI. Seeing no more questions, all in favor? Opposed? That is received. Correspondence. We have a note here from Paul Gregory regarding World Ocean Day, and asking for council to pass a resolution, which is on page 166. I know it is not the practice of this council to declare days or support days like this. However, I'm going to move that we disregard that and that Metchosin support the resolution, which is on page 166 of the agenda package. Can I get a seconder for that motion? Councillor Little had her hand up first, so we'll go with that. Would anyone like to discuss this? Councillor Kahakawila.
Yes, you are correct. We have sort of a standing policy that we don't do proclamations. This would be included in that. This one though is a bit different given just how much of our coastline is connected to the ocean. So and to the water. So I see this as being beneficial to our community. I just hope it's not something, a trend that we start looking at again, because it does make things a little complicated.
Agreed. Yes.
Process-wise, you could have council first move to waive your policy and then push this motion in, so that maybe would reaffirm Kira's council concern.
Thank you. Mayor Rance.
The resolution says that we recognize the anniversary, not that we proclaim it. And the problems that come from these proclamations, this isn't a proclamation, so I think it's appropriate without having to deal with our policy.
All right. So the motion, I'll make the motion. I'll make a better motion if you don't mind. which would be that we recommend to council that council support this, and that we add this to council's agenda for tonight.
I'll second that again.
Seconded by Councillor Little. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? We have one more item on the agenda tonight. Under other business, 10A, we have a pink, which is correspondence that was received too late to be included on the agenda, and so printed on pink paper. And our pink tonight from Bev Bacon is
Move receipt.
move receipt. Sure. Yeah, we have a move receipt from Councillor Kahakawila, seconded from Mayor Rands. Any discussion regarding this? Yes, Councillor Little.
We've got people here in the community, and they probably haven't seen this pink. Maybe you can just sum it up in.
Certainly. So it says, let's see, Dilbit, and then the World Ocean Day Declaration, which is not a declaration, as Mayor Rands has pointed out. But I think the point here that might require consideration, her email says, I am asking MEASC, the Finance and Environment Committee, and Metchosin Council to consider one more issue related to protecting our ocean and coastline. The issue is the freighters languishing in our waters. I would like the District of Metchosin to join with other coastal communities to express concern to the Minister of Transport about the number of freighters having free parking spaces along our coast. The freighters are a source of pollution, and they damage the ocean floor by dragging anchor. Surely solutions and efficiencies can be found by the Ministry of Transport and the Vancouver Port Authority. We need municipalities, especially the coastal municipalities, to defend our ocean. For more information, I refer you to South Coast Shipwatch Alliance with a URL. And because of that, I am going to oppose your motion of receipt, because I would prefer to see this go to MEASC along with the recommendations that we had regarding the WCMRC report. Among other things, it's another suggestion about contacting Ministry of Transport and so I'm
I
gonna oppose your motion
Well, I was gonna
because.
say, I'll withdraw it
Okay,
and move them if it's agreeable with the seconder.
Well, I'm gonna lose if I
So I'll withdraw the motion, and I'm happy to make the recommendation to refer Bev's letter to MEASC, along with the other, I think it was item 6 of the,
right,
the
the
question.
WCMRC
Yes.
recommendations, okay.
Do
So
you
we
want, if you're not going to second it, I will, if you don't feel comfortable, I will second that.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Little. Discussion on that point. Mayor Rance.
Well, just that, and I don't have a real issue here because I think that MEASC will deal with it in an objective way as they always do. So I'm quite happy to send it to MEASC. I just wanted to point out that those freighters represent one of the major sources of commerce, food supply, material supply. We know what happens with supply chain difficulties. And every time you put an impediment in the way of that, the entire society suffers. So there is a trade-off here.
Indeed, there is a trade-off, and I think that's why we need to support our farmers here so that we have local food security on Vancouver Island, and the freighters sitting out in our coast is really a threat to our coastline.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of referring to MEASC and opposed. So that passes. I will accept the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor